All right, welcome everybody back to Book and Spade. This is John Evans here, and we are continuing our Bible study series on John the Baptist. Today will be the last of this John the Baptist series. I do plan on going back in the future in even more detail. We will be departing from the Gospel of Luke, actually, and going to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 6. And I believe we will be starting around verse 14. But, as I've been saying, for the people who are joining this very late or are rewatching this after the live stream is up, this is a very casual, laid-back, coffee hour, pub crawl level of theology. This is not intended to be some kind of intense exercise only for experts. Although I do hope for people who already know a lot about the source material of the Bible, that there'll be some unusual nuggets which they might not know about. So I'm excited to archaeologically dig those up, as it were. I'm here, of course, with my beloved fiance, Samantha. I'm here with my good old mentor, Brandon Young.
Hello.
Great memory. I'm here with, of course, Abigail Travers, my childhood friend and companion.
Hello guys. Hope everybody's doing well.
And I'm here also with Matthew Lewis, who's helping me host the live stream because we know how dreadful I am at technology.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction, John.
Right on. Okay, so as we dive into this, we're going to go into Mark chapter 6. As I said, Samantha will be reading from the NIV, the New International Version. I'm aware that there were some questions about which version.
I've got ESV.
You have ESV? Okay, ESV will do fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. There were some questions about which version we should go with. The ESV here is a little more accurate to the Greek. It's more of a literal translation than the NIV. However, the NIV was the first Bible I read from cover to cover. So, and one of these days, I'd like to even do something as wild as the Message Bible, which is a very wild paraphrase used by Bono and YouTube.
Got it right here too.
I haven't got this here, yeah. So, but anyway, we're going to stick with Mark chapter 6. Sam, if you're willing to take it away around verse 14.
Yes.
Now, the context I want to give here is for the ministry of Jesus. Jesus has already been doing quite a bit. There's been a series of miracles attested by him, and he's been drawing large crowds of people. And it seems to gain a bit of a reaction from the powers that be, who make some comments.
Do you want me to start from the
14th verse, I believe.
Okay. Mark chapter 6, verse 14. King Herod heard of it, for Jesus' name had become known. Some said, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him. But others said, he is Elijah. And others said, he is a prophet, like one of the prophets of old. But when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised.
So let's stop there for a moment. What's really weird about this, I'm eager to get your thoughts, is, the last time we saw John in Mark's gospel, and this is true for Matthew, Mark, and Luke, by the way, he's alive and he's well. He's okay, he's in prison. So maybe that's not well. Being in prison is not well.
Yeah.
But he is alive. And, there's still breath in his lungs. And we hear about all these miracles of Jesus. And out of nowhere, we hear the word and name of Christ is spread abroad. But suddenly we hear that John has been beheaded by Herod, the son of the older Herod, who we spoke about earlier. A very interesting, curious introduction. Before we get the story, we're kind of told in advance, oh yeah, by the way, he's dead. Very, very curious. What are your thoughts about that? What feelings or thoughts does that provoke?
Yeah, that's what I felt too. I was like, what, huh? He's like already dead? What?
Should there be some context?
It'll be a really short Bible study.
All right, guys, you can pack up. We can go home now.
Yep.
No, there's more to it.
Any thoughts on your end, Brent? I have something up my sleeve with this, which is very, very conservative and very orthodox, actually.
Well, my thought is, was it Herod or was it one of his concubines who wanted the head of John the Baptist? Who is it that wanted the head of John John the
I
Baptist.
thought it was the head of sanitation.
I mean, what kind of head are we talking about here?
Oh, okay. No, but before
We'll get to that.
well, yeah, we're gonna get to who asks for the head of John the Baptist. That is between his shoulders, I can assure you.
I mean, you said concubine, so you know.
Yeah, it's
Well,
going. You know, the
Mistress-
Bible is more of an HBO book than it is a G-rated
That's right,
Monmouth
yeah.
Cohen book. But you know, the real event really here that I think this suggests the fact that it kind of is weird how this is placed, and particularly in Mark's gospel, and it is borrowed by Matthew or Luke. Personally, I still think Matthew is older, but that's a whole other debate for a whole other time. Is the fact that I believe that Mark is quoting from an earlier source here. I believe that the story of John the Baptist, which is overwhelmingly consistent in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, not quite word for word, but certainly point for point, was something that was inserted by the sacred author, who I believe to be John Mark, the scribe of Peter the Apostle, into the text, because it is a brief summary of a much longer document. So this implies that this is a very reliable, very early, very well-known source. So whenever something's weird like that in the Bible, it should cause us to sit up on the edge of our seats, because suddenly, oh wow, we might be dealing with something that's very old, incredibly old. So I think this suggests that we are getting a little bit of a front row seat. Now, let Sam dive deeper in.
So continuing on, you get a flashback.
Flashback now.
For it was Herod who had sent and seized John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because he had married her. For John had been saying to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to put him to death. But she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he kept him safe. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he heard him gladly.
So let's stop there for now. Things that are weird to you or exciting that stand out to you. For me, wait, the guy who arrested John, Herod, the tyrant here, is perplexed and hears John gladly. I think it's a beautiful psychological insight that's, by the way, only in Mark. You don't find that in Luke and in Matthew. And keep in mind the tradition. The tradition is right that Mark is the scribe for Peter the Apostle. Peter's brother Andrew was at least, if not a follower of John the Baptist, someone who had seen him and had worked with him. So it does give a kind of up close personal insight into the mind of Herod, which is kind of beautiful, but also alarming at the same time too. So, any thoughts? Anything else that stood out to you about this scenario?
Not really. Just, I think it's interesting that even the Bible has flashbacks, with the original flashback.
Yeah.
Possible.
What do you think of the idea of John speaking truth to power compared to preaching that is today? Because I find it interesting that the reason why this is even in scripture in the first place is because the historical Yochanan, the baptizer, isn't just doing a ritual of baptism out by the River Jordan so people feel good and have an emotional experience. John is someone who is willing to tell the chief political leader of his time that he's acting immorally and that he needs to stop. That is pretty gutsy, to put it mildly. Yeah. Brandon, any thoughts on that one? Or are you too Ab?
That it goes all of a sudden that oh yeah, by the way, he's dead, and now we're going back to how it actually happened, and
yeah. All right, we'll press on. I mean, for me, what's curious about it in my mind is when he says he imprisoned him too. We archaeologically know where this was. It's in a real place called Machaerus. We actually found the foundations of that fortress where he actually was held. So it's a very, very historically grounded text. No one doubts that because it's in Josephus, who was a contemporary. The other element too, which I think is kind of interesting as well, is the divorce of Herod's first wife was a huge political scandal because Herod's first wife was the wife of a neighboring kingdom called Petra in Jordan, which was, if you're into Indiana Jones, it's actually at the end of Indiana Jones 3.
Yeah.
It's that exact area in Jordan where they all like ride off into the sunset. And it's a very old kingdom. People suggest maybe even the Magi from the Gospel of Matthew might have come from there. So, you know, the events that are occurring here, they aren't happening in a corner. John is certainly not only afraid because, you know, we've heard earlier he's an imminent threat of his life, but we know Herod is afraid because
John is a holy, righteous man.
And, you know, political revolutions are also a thing. So,
yeah,
as is
right.
the wrath of
and the people consider him a prophet. So, you know, if you put a prophet to death, the people might turn on you.
Exactly.
So it's kind of, he put him in prison to hush him, but he's not going to kill him because otherwise he'd really have issues with the people.
So, you know, it's kind of like the tension is like so thick you could cut it like a knife.
Mm.
Like, I almost wish I could read this text without the intro, which tells you what happens. Can you imagine hearing this for the first time?
Spoiler.
Yeah.
All
Oh, yeah.
Continuing on, verse 21. But an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his nobles and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. For when Herodias' daughter came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it to you." And he vowed to her, "Whatever you ask me, I will give you, up to half of my kingdom." And she went out and said to her mother, "For what should I ask?" And she said, "The head of John the Baptist." And she came in immediately with haste to the king and asked, saying, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The king was exceedingly sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he did not want to break his word to her. And immediately the king sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in the prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl. And the girl gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard of it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb.
All right, we're going to stop there for the moment, but thoughts?
What? This is so weird. I don't understand. Like, why would this girl ask for this?
For
her mother.
Yeah. Because her mother, Herodias, had a grudge against John.
Well, more than a grudge. So yeah, so basically the situation, why is John really arrested in the first place? Herod, the so-called king, Herod, who's really a governor character, has divorced wife number one. This is wife number two.
That is his brother's wife.
John is like, that's against Jewish marriage law, right? So basically this girl is up there, and, you know, obviously there's a lot of controversy. What kind of dance was this? Was it a sexualized dance? Was it this adorable little ditty that a 12-year-old girl did? There's huge debate how old the daughter here is. Some people say she was as young as 12. Some make her out to basically be, if you read the Oscar Wilde play, Abby, about this, like, she's basically has the hots for John the Baptist the entire time. So no one quite knows. What we do know is this is a pretty scumbag family to begin with. They're not really
right.
Like, historically, they end up after this, by the way, getting into so much hot water with the Roman Empire. They are exiled to Gaul, to southern France, which does not spark the Da Vinci Code, I assure you. But any other questions or thoughts about the weirdness of it? Because it certainly is.
No, you explained it. You explained it like a lot more, and that helped a lot. Now I understand it completely.
It's basically the brother's wife that John the Baptist spoke against. So it makes sense that she would have a grudge against him. And so when her daughter was like, "What should I ask for?" she used that opportunity. And the king, in his proud ways, had promised anything.
Up to half of my kingdom, which is, by the way, an ancient Semitic way of saying, well, who deserves half of the kingdom of a ruler in the ancient world? And that language is consistently used for that of a spouse. So this is where things get maybe sexualized in a very disturbing kind of a way, frankly.
So it could have been a marriage proposal, kind of.
Well, not a literal marriage proposal, not literally, right? Because he's not going to say, "Oh, I'm going to marry my daughter," right?
Right.
I'm not going to get into modern political statements like that, but instead, it certainly is a comment. What would go to your mother? What I would give to your mother, I promise to also give to you, at least socially or politically in this sense. And let's say, what would make a guy say, "I will give you anything" here? Well, father and daughter bond, that's possible. It could be an innocent comment to a 12-year-old girl. But imagine if this is an older woman. And keep in mind, Mary was probably married off at age 13, 14. So the way they have different customs. Is this also a comment of a father who is wildly roaring drunk at a party? So it's very hard to tell what the context is, but you can imagine how artists can go wild with this. What's clear is Herod is eating, having his daughter dance, while John, the holy man, is in prison awaiting execution. Herod and the court are having a party while the common people are suffering outside. So it certainly is a little bit of this let them eat cake moment, although that is apocryphal.
Let him eat cake was actually never said by Marie Antoinette. It was just supposedly.
It's like what, a journalist at the time or something?
Yeah, it's all apocryphal. That's stupid apocryphal. Yeah. But thoughts on your end, Brandon?
I think it's interesting that he, John the Baptist, Herod, gives into peer pressure in a way.
That's right.
Like
sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I mean, like he didn't have to. I mean, nobody orders, nobody like orders a king around, right? So like
right.
He must have really cared about this girl to give her what she wanted.
Or he just needed to prove himself, Yeah.
Well, it says because of his oaths, right? And those who are with him. So Herod has made oaths publicly, right? He's publicly given his word. He doesn't want to go back on his word.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, he wants to save face.
Hence, never promise anything that you don't know what it is first.
I'll tell you anything. But you mentioned some works of art, Brandon. So the Caravaggio painting. Now, Sam here is the artist.
Yes.
So what stands out about the Caravaggio painting? I'm just curious.
Well, the Caravaggio, Bring Me the Head of John the Baptist. It's his head on a silver platter, and it hangs above the. I believe it's in Malta, or it might be on maybe not Opus Dei, but Jesuit order entrance in Rome. And I remember seeing it, and it's pretty startling, because Caravaggio used shading and color and light in a way that nobody had before, and that's why he was a patron, he was the second Michelangelo. But yeah, so there is a very famous, if anybody wants to look this up later on, that it's the head of John the Baptist, with Herod's mistress there, and bringing it to him on a silver platter. But the funny thing is that Caravaggio, in his genius, made the head himself. It was a self-portrait. Yeah, so he was saying, he was saying, I'm John the Baptist in a way. This idea of the John the Baptist is sacrificial character that you must willingly go to death for. How many of us are able to say, yeah, we'll give our life on the line for, Jesus,
Or
I
like
mean,
everybody, anybody.
or
I don't know.
anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I
But,
could. I mean, if it was my family or friend, yes, but I don't
mhm.
know if it was a stranger. I don't know if I could do it.
Well, exactly.
And I think it stands out too, once again, the fact that the early church was spread by martyrs. The word martyr really just means in its original context, witness. But the problem was to be a witness to Jesus in the first 3 centuries of Christianity meant you died. Like the number of surviving Christians in the first 3 centuries of the church, those who do make it, are largely those who either regrettably compromise, or they're very good at being in communities that are less focused on persecution, or they happen to have social connections that are getting them off. Generally speaking, if you are a Christian early on, it is almost certainly a death sentence. Not entirely, but almost. Out of all the followers of Jesus, only John dies a natural death, and that's after he's been like put on an island that's essentially like a slave labor camp before he's released. So, Brandon, to your point, I mean, John is someone who's picked up right away by the early church as the example of what it is to offer your life. But like you're saying, Abby, it's like, for like a loved one, maybe you lay down your life. Maybe I'd lay down my life for my friends, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would, depending on like, I don't know if I would if it's somebody I just met or something. I don't know. I mean, it's like I would like to think I would, because I'm, I like to think that I'm a selfless person, but also, am I really? I don't know.
And that's what the whole narrative about Peter really strikes me, right? In terms of the passion narratives, where it's the night that Jesus is about to, give his life. He's at the Last Supper, right? And of course, he announces, truly I say to you, one of you is going to betray me. All of them denies it. Of course, Judas walks out. And of course, Peter says to Jesus quite clearly, right? Even if all are to flee from you and run from you, I will die for you, right? And Christ responds, surely before the cock, crows thrice, you will deny me 3 times. And, what I love about that narrative, frankly, is we are Peter every single time.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't matter how, Peter saw miracles. Peter walked on water in Matthew 16. Sorry, in an earlier chapter of Matthew, actually. But instead, what ends up happening is when he comes face to face with the reality of death, he gets quite freaked out. And the fact of the matter is, we're all in those shoes. What gives someone the courage to go that extra yard is, in my mind, a supernatural courage.
Yeah.
Because the instinct of self-preservation is overwhelming, no matter what your ideals happen to be. And what's amazing is, one of the reasons why I believe the Bible to be reliable is the fact that Peter isn't sugar-coated. And neither is John. John isn't sugar-coated earlier. We read last week the passage where, John is questioning, are you the one, or are we waiting for somebody else?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know about you. If I wanted all of you to write my authorized biography, I kind of would want some passages to be touched up a little bit, a little airbrush here and there, look halfway decent.
But you would want somebody who actually knew you to write your autobiography or your, biography someday. Can you imagine if some person who didn't know you wrote about your life?
It happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know.
But... yeah. What Brandon, like, on our conspiratorial blog sites, how many people, like, they'll write slanderous pieces about someone, without them.
Oh God, yeah, of course.
Yeah. But you know, and Matt, you know where all the bodies are buried. That's all I just.
I have all of your old writings in on my computer, so I could be a good candidate.
Yeah, honestly, I think all of you would be more than qualified. I think it's special, Abby, that you do have even the stuff that I've lost for years, including a failed.
Well, the one thing, as I will say, I do not have the Lord of the Rings fan fiction that we wrote many years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I only have a few chapters of the sequel. Yes, there was going to be a sequel. The first one was never published. Well, like chapter 1 was published, and we did write a whole story, but alas, it has been lost.
Yeah, I'd say that there were zombies and there was wine in that one, and the sequel.
And Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it was
zombies.
Very, and elven wine and
Corey Olsen
Morgoth and other people captured Corey Olsen, and he gave us permission to use him. By the way,
he puts him on a chair like Turin.
Yeah, this is definitely going in the book.
Yeah,
for sure.
Well, back to the
back to the Bible. No, but for me, that's the cool thing, right? Is and Brandon, you'll notice from your Beowulf studies, right?
Yeah.
Is like if you look at the way people actually talk and have conversation, they're gonna meander from point to point to point to point, and then they're gonna
walk
around. And ancient authors, unlike modern authors, love the idea of tangent. In fact, the tangent was more important to them.
Even in the Old Norse, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's what's interesting here is the death of John the Baptist is like a random tangent in the Gospel of Mark.
It is a bit of a tangent, but it relates. Everything comes together as a tapestry or a constellation, because you have John the Baptist prefiguring Christ, essentially. You have the sacrifice, you have the willingness, you have him. He's a very mysterious figure, in my opinion. He's one of the most, he comes before Christ, but he knows that Christ is essentially the one. And that takes a great amount of humility. Imagine if you were the greatest guy in the sort of the area, and then this, you have to admit that this person is actually the real deal. It takes humility. And I think that changed John the Baptist from then on. And so when the head of John the Baptist, bring me a head of John the Baptist on a silver plate, he went willingly, in my opinion. Like, I mean, I'm imposing that. It doesn't say that in the text, but he must have. He must have been like, this is what it is. And that's such courage that we could use these days, is that we could use that type of courage where it's like, yeah, I'm willing to die for my beliefs in some way.
Amen. And a hearty amen.
Totally agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, on my end, I believe that the text is inspired. So
Absolutely.
I think that what's interesting is, irrespective of how the sources were laid, I think that at least regardless of what Peter was intending dictating this to Mark, whether Peter had like a mental tangent loop. Oh yeah, by the way, I need to mention this. What's clear is that the Holy Spirit was using Peter in that moment.
Exactly.
To direct that. And I think that the Holy Spirit here was inspiring, as you're saying, a prefiguring of the passion. And really like a foreshadowing of us. Yeah. Because I think all of us go through a period at some point, if we're people of faith, or our backs are up against the wall, and we could go to prison and die spiritually. And historically, sadly, that's happened quite a bit. Go to the uncomfortable place, go to the hard place, go to the cross. Or
there are still places where it's dangerous to be a Christian, like even today in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard Jim Caviezel talk about this recently, and he's the actor that played Christ in Passion of the Christ, which I think is one of the greatest movies ever. But he played a new film, and he said he's such a great actor, this guy, and he really feels it in his heart, And he said that it's like being, what did he say? It was like when God tells you to do something, you do not hesitate.
Oh yeah.
Like you get a calling from God. I mean, there's two roads. Either you didn't take that path or you did take that path. And with all the suffering and that goes along with it. And it's that sort of thing that we have to choose with every single day. This is why the Bible isn't just an ancient relic of historical, what would you say, John? History.
Yeah, it's not an artifact that's dead. It's
alive. It's evolving.
Yeah, it's a living. Yeah, it's a living.
It's a living
thing.
document. Yeah, it's a living document that has meaning to every single person here living today, because not much has changed. And so, you have people all over the world like us who are trying to learn from these lessons and see where we can improve upon them, maybe seeing where we can perhaps not get our head chopped off, but also if we have to come to that, I'm ready. I'm prepared. My soul is prepared, as Indiana Jones says.
Yeah, I actually heard this guy because there was an ad on YouTube for an app, like a meditation app, that he talked about. I was like, huh, interesting. Okay, then.
Yeah.
Can't remember what the app was called, but it was like a
probably
meditation.
Calm app.
Hollow?
Hollow,
yeah. Hollow, yeah.
Hollow, yeah.
I know you're in the middle of something right now, but I'd wonder if you just pray with me for a second. In the name of the Father and the Son, and it's like, oh, is that an ad? I mean, I that's fine, but listen, like, let me do it on my own volition. Like, don't force
it's a little.
me.
I mean, I skipped. You can skip the ad after a few seconds, thankfully, but it was like.
Thankfully. But he's like,
okay.
In the name of Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola, and Verizon.
I actually I use the app, and
do you really?
I have two jobs, and this is my only time for real prayer is when I go out and run.
Yeah.
And it's my go-to these days. I usually start it with it. I'm doing the there's a lot of different things on that app. There's like the I forget the name of the priest who does it, the Bible in the Year sort of podcast.
Father Mike Schmidt.
Yeah, it's a good way to sort of like if you haven't read through all the Bible, I think like it's one way of going through a certain chronology of it. I mean, like I said, it's one way of doing it, but then there's a lot of you can hear the rosary read to you by the actors of The Chosen and by like different
beautiful
different people. It's very cool. Yeah.
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg reads the rosary, man. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Personally, I'm going to give a defense of the Chosen app for a moment. Not Chosen app, the Hollow.
Hollow.
Even though I can't get it on my flipping phone because
they'll probably sponsor us after this. So.
I would love to get sponsored by Hollow.
I mean, that would be amazing. Your
I'll
channel.
Talk to Mark.
You can. John, you have over 1,000 subscribers. You could actually make money doing this now. Because
don't.
Well, regardless, the reason why I'd like to defend Hollow for a moment is because a lot of people struggle to pray.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A lot of people just don't know. Like, okay, well, there's a rosary, there's beads, there's like 5 decades of it. How do I do that from like a Roman Catholic background, or even like an Episcopal? Episcopals also pray their rosaries too, by the way. Or like, okay, how do I like meditate on the Bible? And what the app does is it's on a very beginner's level. It breaks it down and says, all right, here's a passage. I'm going to read it out loud. We're going to get the best people on the planet Earth who know how to read things to read this. And then what we're going to do is in a non-hokey, non-churchy way, try and break it down in modern language, which I think is good, because I find, regrettably, when it comes to prayer and when it comes to the person of Jesus, regrettably, often there are those who have an intense, powerful relationship with Christ and know how to pray very deeply. And then there is horrible media out there that doesn't do a good job of communicating it. And then there's everybody else who would have sincere questions and sincere, just like an honest, curiosity, like, is this legit? Is this not legit? What's going on? Who are deterred because the media is so cheesy and so hollow and so fake. Whereas when you have something like the Hollow app, which in my opinion is pretty good. I don't find it corny. I'm like, oh, this works. Good. I'm like, oh, great. I have a resource to point people to. I'm like, check this out. This works. Or like the TV show The Chosen, where it has John the Baptist being a bit of a weird guy eating bugs. It's easy to relate to him.
Oh, yeah. The thing that I want to happen with The Chosen is I want them to get audio description, because then I'll actually watch it.
I just heard of The Chosen today because I was watching The Sound of Freedom with Jim Caviezel, and he said, I think the guy he portrayed,
Ben Ballard, yeah.
Thank you. Said, I mean, this guy is amazing, right? But he said that the only show he watches is The Chosen. I'm like, I've never seen that. Where can I find it? Like, it's not advertised.
Yeah, well, I mean, talking about independently funded, and crowdfunded from the roots up, which is something I appreciate.
It's actually on Netflix these days. You can watch at least the first season. Yeah, it's become way more mainstream. It originally was just on this Hollow platform, which is actually free on Roku. It's like you can watch all of that stuff for free. Cool.
Yeah.
But they also ported it to Netflix. Yeah. It's great. I mean, I'm a big believer in, like, making media and big media, like large studios, way more literate in how to make these kinds of movies and shows and apps, because there's a huge sort of sleeping demographic that is going to want to go see this stuff. And
I mean, like it's kind of been proven though with Sound of Freedom, because I guess like it's been sold out places, which is like really
there's not enough
unusual.
Theaters.
Yeah, and I'm going to shout out one more app real quick, just because competition's a good thing. Pray As You Go is another app that's really good for, like, if you're trying to get into the prayerful headspace. I'm not you could do all this without apps, but there is something powerful about an auditory experience, and so
absolutely
this helps get you there sometimes,
Good.
So I throw that out there as well.
I was also curious to see Sound of Freedom also to sell out recently, and it deeply relates to what we're talking about, because once again you have a figure like John the Baptist, who historically, once again, as a prophet, speaks truth to power, unites people around the idea of repentance, which is not feeling bad, but a whole new evaluative point of view, about love of neighbor and love of God, right? And then basically pays the penalty for love at the end of the day. And you look at a movie, for those who are unfamiliar, starring James Caviezel, as Tim Ballard, who was someone who busted child trafficking, basically. And this movie, which is a very hard-hitting subject matter, to put it mildly, 5 years ago, 5 flipping years ago, and on very, on a strict budget, let's put it that way. And because this movie was kind of unveiling a lot of horrible corruption and halls of power, and maybe areas of systematic forms of oppression that are overlooking child trafficking, particularly, this movie was basically shadow banned. I mean, people do not want this thing out at all. But the moment it gets a shot in the sun because of crowdfunding, because of people who put their own, spare change into the basket. This thing is doing a better job than Indiana Jones in the theater.
Yeah, no, that's what I've heard. Yeah, like I said, it's like sold out. I mean, when's the last time there was a movie that was sold out? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, and especially in the theater.
I hope the Barbie movie sells out and Oppenheimer. I'm actually gonna go see both of them on the same day.
Yes,
I'm gonna do the Barbenheimer viewing.
Of course you are.
Guess which order? Guess which order I'm gonna watch them in, everyone.
I think you should watch Oppenheimer first.
Yes.
And Barbie.
Yes.
Second.
Why do you suggest that? Great idea.
Because you want to go dark, and then you want to go light.
Yeah, but like even more than that, that doesn't even cover it. You want to go nuclear devastation, and then you want to go.
That's what I mean.
What can lift me out of that? Well, let's see if Barbie can.
Yeah,
it's an experiment. It's an experiment, and I'm about to be the first test subject of many. First in line.
Awesome. That's great.
Thank you, guys. That's what I do.
Yeah, I do want to mention, the actors are on strike, the writers are on strike. Shout out to all of them. Yep. Yeah. Definitely support you from our little channel.
Support artists, yeah. And talking about that prophetic ministry and that prophetic role, once again, is speaking truth to power. That here are artists who have been overlooked for a very, very, very long time, and who have been really dictated what they are supposed to and not put into a script. Talking about the horrors of censorship, Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing about Sound of Freedom, about The Chosen, that I enjoy about a crowd-funded platform. Nothing against studios here. Wink, wink, nod, nod. But the thing about something like Angel Studios, that is a grassroots studio, is the fact that there's a little more liberty in what you can show.
Absolutely.
And there's a little more liberty in what you can say.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not about to say that the literal beheading of a holy man like John is the equivalent of cancel culture. I'm not about to make that bridge. But what I am going to say is the fact that there is a necessity for an open space for people to offer opinions and viewpoints, so that there can be a challenging of powers. And I would say that there's a supernatural level to this too, right? Because why is John beheaded? Okay, yes, because he spoke the truth in an abstract sense. Well, I would say supernaturally, why is John beheaded? Because he is an authentic prophet.
Yeah.
An authentic prophet threatens the spiritual powers of darkness.
Yeah.
That don't want, what they want are preachers and pastors who are preaching a gospel entirely focused on the here and now, on how much money and how much
materialism.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name names,
prosperity gospel.
Exactly. And
what's his name? John Osteen, or his son is Joel.
Joel, yeah.
My dad loved him. I mean, I used to grow up. I listened to John, actually, his father.
Yeah.
And then there's so many people that are like, oh, this is a business model. You sound out arenas, you sound at the Houston Astrodome every single Sunday. And, maybe I could just get on that bandwagon and preach. I don't want to say anything bad about Joel.
Yeah, I actually kind of like the guy, even though he gets a lot of flack. The reason why I look with a lot more patience and compassion on him is often he's a doorway for a lot of people who otherwise would never touch
Absolutely.
Him. But regrettably, if that's where people stop, you're not going to get to the Martin Luther King Jr.'s. You're not going to get to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who gave his life.
Oh my God!
Germany, to try to literally smuggle Jews out of Germany, and was actually part of the plot to kill Hitler. Actually,
I mean, yeah, you're not really, you're only scratching the surface.
You're not going any deeper.
You're not really, you're just going you're going to a show, it's not even a church service, if it's in
Right.
something in an arena, like that's not a church. I'm sorry.
I've been to, I remember in my past, John and everybody, I've been to, what would you call it, Protestant churches or evangelical sort of churches, and they were great, but the service started off with, a band, and it was like a perfect band. It's a drummer, they had 2 drummers, 3 guitarists, and 2 bassists, and they just started, and that's great and everything, but it was a little different from what I'm used to, which is like
Gregorian chant,
right? Or just like, the idea of like solemnity and silence and just listening to the word and taking part of the ritual that was there thousands of years before you were. I don't think Christ had a band with an electric bass. In my opinion,
but so, would he have? If he could.
No, he was a great. I mean, you ever see Jesus Christ Superstar?
I have to admit I haven't, Jesus but John's Christ. Told me enough about it.
Yeah, you should see John, Jesus Christ Superstar.
It's a wild ride.
It's wild. Yeah,
it really is. I mean, there are parts of it I think actually are an interesting take, and then there are other parts which I've shared with my students, and they looked in utter horror at the screen.
Oh God! Well,
it's a musical.
What's that buzz? Tell me what's happening. What's that buzz? Tell me what's happening. What's that buzz?
I love Heaven on Their Minds, mostly because
that song gets Judas absolutely correct, in my opinion.
I mean, mostly because it's, if you look up the version sung by Jerome Pradon, or Jérôme Pradon, the French actor, it's like unhinged, and it's amazing.
Oh my gosh, Abby, you just whip out the French like accent super naturally. Just that, okay. I see you, Abby.
I mean, that was what I studied in school. I studied French.
I see you, Abby.
I lived in Paris. My grandparents wrote French grammar textbooks, and they were professors.
Yeah. I've been to France once on my honeymoon, and it was amazing. We went to Paris. And Dunkirk, and it was pretty life-changing. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Matt, that's amazing. Paris is
Wait, John, you went to Paris too, right?
Yes, I did. I sang in Notre Dame before the place burned.
That's great.
Imagine singing in it as the place burns.
That's
the music. Now that's the music I'm used to. That's what I want to hear when I go to church. I want to hear the kind of music that burns down cathedrals. Oh wait, sorry. That sounds like death metal. Sorry. Never mind.
All right. So to rein it back in, guys, I want to return to the death of John the Baptist here, and I also want to read an early creed that mentions John that we actually might not know necessarily. Is at least Johannine in some form. To go back to the death of John, there were 2 recent archaeological finds. I just want to mention that once again, just anchor this historically in some pretty surprising ways. First was, I mean, we've all heard of the medieval relic trade. There were so many heads of John the Baptist that were claimed to survive. The joke that EWTN often gives is, hey, we want to sell you a head of John the Baptist for your indulgence.
No.
Well, actually, guess what? We already got one. No, but you have the child's head of John the Baptist, which we can actually sell.
Oh my God! What?
But the reality is, actually, there are some relics that are authentic and that are reliable, in so much as we know they come from the right period and the right time, right? And in 2010, in Bulgaria, of all places, there was I believe it was a Roman Catholic church that was doing renovations, and they found a small sarcophagus with some fragments of a mandible and I believe some hand bones that were there, small fragments. and they did radiocarbon dating on them. And they also did some genetic testing on them. The claim is that they come from a Semitic individual from the 1st century AD. So it's of the right time period as John and from the right place as John, which is pretty startling. But even more, I think, cool for me is, of all people, Shimon Gibson, who I love, by the way. I love. He is, I believe, a Jewish archaeologist. I don't know if he's a man of practicing faith at all, frankly. In like the mid 2000s, he heard of a cave outside Beth HaKarim, and Beth HaKarim is the traditional birthplace of John the Baptist. And the dating of the traditional birthplace is debated sources, but that's where everybody says John is born. He's in that area essentially. There's a Zechariah inscription nearby. Well, Shimon Gibson found a cave in an area called Supa, and in that cave are tons and tons and tons and tons of broken pottery vessels near a ritual bathing pool. And all those ritual bathing vessels that are there, they're one-handed clay pot. They were deliberately smashed as like votive offerings at that site. So it's as if someone's pouring water into them and then smashing them and leaving them there from about the time of Jesus, the 1st century AD. Okay, well, that's kind of odd, but okay, well, everybody did ritual mikvahs back in the day. Why is that special? Well, okay, if it isn't weird enough that this cave is right near the traditional birthplace of John, there is an ancient drawing, a cave art on the wall. The cave art depicts a man wearing a hairy coat, and he has his hand raised with a staff and a blessing gesture.
Oh, wow.
He has his hair in an upper top knot. And what's interesting is near his legs, there's a groove in the wall for where you would have held relics, of all things. So it looks like a guy as described as John. It's near his birthplace, and you have all these smashed vessels. So that was only recently discovered, very, very recently discovered. There's also a groove in the floor for where you would place your foot. So Shimon Gibson believes this is a part of ritual foot mikvah or foot washing. But what is really clear about the site, right, is that it didn't disappear after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, like you would expect it would. It becomes a cult offering site for nearly 300 to 400 years. So this place is consistently occupied. So in terms of, once again, like John the Baptist, historical reliability, when it says in the text here, right, then John's disciples came and took his body and buried it in a tomb. I think we know where that is. I think we know exactly where that is. Yeah, I think that probably...
Is it headless?
Well, once again, there is no body in that cave. There's a niche for where you would.
There is a pool. There is sort of a pool where people could be baptized.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it certainly does reflect the reality of the last couple of verses there. And I think this powerfully attests to the fact we're talking about real things and real people. This is not, and now it's recent. It's like the past 10 years. Gibson also probably found the real site where Jesus was scourged as well. The Fortress Antonia, probably not the location. It's probably Herod the Great's palace that was occupied by Pilate at the time. So
I'm trying to think,
very reputable source.
Yeah.
Any thoughts have you before we move on?
Oh, no, I just think it's interesting that there's like archaeological evidence that, is like actually being found, that because like so much of this stuff is like, did it really happen? And this is why I really have enjoyed the John the Baptist thing, because he's not just in the Bible. There's other historical records of him.
Yes.
Whereas Jesus, it's like, okay, well, maybe Jesus existed.
Well, yeah.
Historically.
Yeah, I'd push back only in so much, Abby, that Jesus also appears in other historical sources.
That's right.
Okay. He's referred to by Romans. Yeah. Yeah, you go ahead, Brendan, because you've also done.
No, I just know Josephus in the War of the Jews. He's mentioned. You can help me out, John, on this. He's mentioned
in exterior Roman sources as well. So.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that too. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so he's referenced in multiple sources.
Multiple. Yeah,
the claim that Jesus didn't exist is called the mythicist view. The most famous atheist biblical scholar, Bart Ehrman. He's known
I know that guy.
Right? He finds the mythicist view laughable because basically, as he argues, the evidence for the extra biblical evidence alone, and the fact that there is a movement called Christianity surrounded by a founder, demands that you have that founder under such a short period of time. So, for example, the gap between the historical Jesus and the first references to him outside of his life, right? The writings of Paul, the early creeds, it's a gap of no less than 3 years, really. And if you want to push it to within, So the earliest creed about Jesus is in Philippians chapter 2. I can recite it from memory. Have this mind in you that was also in the Messiah, Jesus, who though he existed in the form of God, did not think equality with God something to be grasped at, but instead emptied himself and appeared in the form of a slave and was found in human likeness and was obedient to death, even the death one dies on a cross. Therefore God greatly exalted him and gave him the name that is above every name, that the name of Jesus, every knee must bow, of those on earth, those under the earth, and those in the heavens, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of the Father. Okay, that sounds like a lot of religious language for someone who isn't very, very religious, right? But here's the shtick, right? Paul is writing 20 years after the life of Jesus. That's short historically. Who's still alive 20 years after Jesus is crucified? Well, his half-brothers or cousins, James and Jude. Who's still alive? His mother. She's still running around. Who's also still running around?
Right.
The guy who crucified him. That text is in Greek, but I don't want to call it poorly translated Greek, but it's clearly Greek translated from Aramaic, the language of Jesus, right? So Paul's quoting from an earlier source. So how old is that earlier source? I don't want to say it's Bruce Metzger, but it's someone of that professional study that places that really early, as I said, within 3 years probably of the crucifixion and resurrection event historically. So it's super early. And I would say Ehrman would, the skeptic would date it within probably 15 years. So very early attestation for the historical Jesus. But to what you're saying, Abby, John is odd, right? John the Baptist, because John the Baptist doesn't perform any miracles, right? John the Baptist doesn't raise the dead. John the Baptist wasn't known primarily for also instigating a political movement, right?
Right.
Instead, John is basically understood as accomplishing a prophetic role, and from a Christian point of view, very clearly as the one who prepares the way for Jesus. And why is that interesting as a historical point of view? Because he was so weird, frankly, in a beautiful way, I think a powerful way, that fellow Jewish eyewitnesses, like Brandon was mentioning Flavius Josephus and the Antiquities of the Jews, they all respected John even if they didn't understand him. Like Josephus, who's a contemporary Abby of John, he is like the source for Judaism at the time of Jesus. Atheists, you name it, they'll quote him because he's a reliable historical source. What's interesting about Josephus is he was of the opposite party as John. He was a temple priest, basically. He was of that religious systematic order. And the way he writes about John is with incredible regret. He was like, listen, I'm really sorry that this went down. And that's incredible, right? Because while the same could be said about the historical Jesus, and I'm the fundamentalist here who thinks the Bible is reliable. But while the same could be said of the historical Jesus, what is amazing is John's popularity as a figure doesn't. I know the claim is Jesus supplants him in terms of popularity, and he kind of dwindles. I disagree. I genuinely see the fact that here's a 30-something-year-old Jewish prophetic figure from 2,000 years ago, where basilicas are still named after him.
Absolutely.
That's nuts. Name another Jewish prophetic figure from 2,000 years ago, apart from Jesus. Any other one who has that level of cultural prominence, even entering into the English language, I put my head on a platter, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I wanted to also go a little deep dive with you, also to kind of spill the beans on where I want to take the Bible study next.
Yeah.
Open up to the Gospel of John, chapter 1. I'm just going to go through the first 14 verses.
Please go.
Because I personally, if you've grown up a Christian, yeah, you've probably heard this all the time.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But I want us to once again hear how this sounds now from having heard about John the Baptizer.
Yes.
And I'm gonna make.
Yeah, I think that's a great way. I think that's a great direction to take it. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, it's different, right? Because now we've heard about who this John guy is, right?
In the big picture, yeah.
Right, and I'm gonna make a case about the historical quality of these first 14 verses, that they actually are earlier than the text. So just the first.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, I agree.
Go into.
Actually, yeah, no.
Are you gonna read it, John, or what?
Oh, sorry.
Are you gonna read John chapter 1?
Yeah, I'm actually gonna have Sam read on.
Oh, Sam. Yeah, okay, great.
John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness, to bear witness about the light, that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to bear witness about the light. The true light, which gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his people did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness about him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks before me, because he was before me." For from his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ.
So before Sam continues for a moment, right? Given what we've heard about John, let's ignore for a moment the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Mm-hmm. You know me, I'm excited about that bit, right? What stands out to you about the John references here? I'm just curious.
Like, they're very complimentary. I mean, not that the other ones weren't, but they're like they kind of assume that you already know who John the Baptist is a little bit, like, seems like.
Correct. The assumption is you know who this John guy is, right? There was a man whose name was John. He was sent. It's also interesting, right, that they quote. Yeah. Keep going, Brandon.
Well, I just want to say it's almost like they're setting up John the Baptist, because we can't be Christ. So it's like we can be John the Baptist, maybe. And so the light shone through him, and so on and so forth. And he had his ups and downs, and he ended up dying like a human person, but he was a hero, and he made way for the actual living Christ, right? So in that way, it's like, isn't that what we should all be serving? Is that sort of thing? It's like, we're not Christ. I'm not Christ. I know that. I can feel in my body sometimes, right? But I'm not Christ. I don't think, John, you would say that you're Christ.
No, I'm not a cult leader over
but
here.
No, definitely. Yeah.
Abby
Yeah,
would say
right.
she is Christ.
No.
Abby would say she is Christ because.
What?
No,
I
I'm
wouldn't.
joking.
Yeah.
No, she'd be
No,
like,
I am
she's
much
like,
too.
she's like Brandon Judas. She's like, you will be my best friend. I will never betray you. I will never betray you, Abby. No, but for real, it's like, okay, so they're setting up John the Baptist here as like the immediate, like the first person they mentioned. So the logos was with John, and the logos was, so that sets up, first of all, that's like a universal setup. I mean, and then they go straight into John the Baptist. They could have mentioned Goliath. They could have mentioned David. They could have mentioned Adam. They could have mentioned many of Solomon.
But yeah, right? He mentioned
John the Baptist.
Yeah, yep.
Because he was humble enough.
Here's my crazy thesis, right? Is I think you're right, Brandon. John is the stand-in for all of humanity.
Yes, exactly.
John is
he's us. He's
almost
the reader.
Adam, right? Like,
we're not Christ. We're maybe John the Baptist at the best.
You know, what we could do is prepare for the coming of
something, yeah, right,
or embody, you know, be the body of Christ, which
and
was
be the courage enough to take your head off, you know. So I think he gained notoriety at this point. I don't know if this was written. You can tell me.
Yeah, so I actually think that this is a really beautiful passage, because I'm gonna have Sam read on a little bit more before we cap off.
Oh, please. Yeah.
But the text goes from this massive preview about the pre-existent logos, right? The pre-existent word, which becomes flesh, and it's Jesus, right? This massive overview, right? Down into the nitty-gritty of what's going on with John, very, 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 very quickly. And what I'm arguing is that this opening section is actually a creed. It's like a creedal statement. It's saying what our community believes about Jesus, why we believe that about Jesus, and it's all centered around, interestingly enough, Jesus's relationship to humanity, right? He came unto his own did not receive him, right? Jesus is the creator, Jesus is the Logos, Jesus is God, right? Which I fervently believe, right, as a Christian. What's interesting is it's in relationship to John, very intricately to John. And it's almost as if the first things that needs to be set straight, right, for this religious community that is either collecting or receiving this creedal statement, is that John is the one who prepares for Jesus, that John isn't Jesus, right? So why would there be a need to do this if the text is super, 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 super late? Because after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, right? Which is, by the way, Abby, only like 40 years after the crucifixion of Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Super early, Abby. I mean, like within like the same lifetime of the people of Jesus. No one
that's pretty fast, honestly. I mean.
Yeah, but like within that 40-year span, right? No one at that point, at that already early point, right? No one at that early point is going to confuse whether John is the Messiah or whether Jesus is the Messiah. No one that early is going to be concerned about that. That means that had to have been super, super early to have a concern. We have to make it clear to our audience that Jesus and John is the one who prepares the way, but Jesus is the way. We need to make that really super clear so there's no confusion. Here's the irony, right? Abby, people still think that this text is super early. They date it to about 90 AD, which is about, let's say, 50 years after the 40, 50, 60, 70. Yeah, 50 years after the crucifixion. So that's still early, by the way. You know, John, who is John, the disciple of Jesus, not to be confused, is the claimed author. I personally hold to that. There's tons of early sources to make that very clear. So it's still super early. But if it was written in 90 AD, after the temple, after all that stuff, no one's worried whether John is the Messiah or not. No one's asking that. So how early do you need to bring this up? Well, in the book of Acts, which is about the early church, also written by Luke, right? We hear of a really beautiful but weird run-in that some of Paul's followers have in with a guy named Apollos about, let's say, 20 years maybe after the crucifixion of Christ. So in the 50s AD, right? And this guy Apollos is running around telling people that there's this guy John and he's come to baptize people and you should be baptized. And he hasn't heard about Jesus yet. And he seems to be kind of confused as to the role of John and the role of Jesus. And of course they have a conversation. Paul sets him straight, explains, you know, the element that John is the one who prepared the way, that Christ is the way, right? So that tells you that somewhere within like the 20-year gap between the crucifixion resurrection events, right, and the ministry of Paul, there were still questions about what was John's role. So I'd say that the first couple of verses here, at least parts of them, clearly are from the 50s AD. Only 20 years. Only 20 flipping years after the event, which means this whole language of Jesus is the Logos, Jesus is the Word, I think fits right in with the Judaism of the time period. It makes complete sense. So
interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, you do make a good point, because the longer, you know, the longer ago something happened, the more that it's accepted as fact.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, if everyone says John is and I believe that John did historically say the things that are said here, because I think it's too early to mix it up with fable, because you still have eyewitnesses running around who saw him and would have said, you know, he didn't say that, you know? So I do believe he did say he was preparing the way. I do believe he acknowledged Jesus as the one who was to come, right? But that doesn't mean his followers always got it. And we always know the followers of Jesus himself didn't always get it either.
No.
So I think it's interesting that like the first verses, even of the fourth gospel, the last gospel, right? Yeah. Although I think parts of it, as you can see, I think are way earlier, because I think John.
Oh, you mean the Gospel of Judas? No, I'm just kidding.
No. We could discuss historically why that's super late, by the way.
No, I know Elaine Pagels and
yeah. Well, I want to actually continue, if it's cool with you guys, the Gospel of John in the next few series.
Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I think that's always I think it's always a good introduction. Like, you know, other Christians that I've talked to, they're like, you should read the Gospel of John. Yeah. So.
Well, they don't understand it. That's the problem, right? And like most people are like, oh, I read that. It sounds like superstition. It sounds like, but when you realize the context of it and what it's revealing through the word, it's absolutely mind-blowing and could change your spirit, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, right, that the Gospel of Luke, for example, we read it earlier. I think, Abby, it was our first Bible study together, actually, where we went to the beginning of Luke, right, in the days of Herod, in the days of Tetrarch, in the days of such and such and
right.
Right.
Which is so weird to me to think that was only like 3 weeks ago that we started this.
Yeah. No, the time is running on in weird.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I was looking back at your channel just to see like you know how the views were doing on the live streams, and I was like, wait, the first Bible study you did, which I wasn't a part of, was like only 4 weeks ago. What? Or
Yeah, I mean, like it doesn't feel like 4 weeks. It actually feels
no,
like
it doesn't. And it's as I said last week, it's so like interesting doing this, and I think it's needed. People. Yeah, Brandon, you're right. People just like read and they just are like, oh, I guess that's what that says, and
Right.
must
Well,
be
I think
it.
yeah, exactly. Well, I think with Christianity especially, they've been so indoctrinated to hate it, that they read a headline and they think that's true. So, I mean, you ask many people, I don't know how many polls have been done about if you asked, was Jesus real or not, or historically real or not, or a myth? Guarantee you, I bet majority of people would say myth, you know. They think but it was a historical event and it really happened. Like, that's the huge difference. It's not like Odin. Odin, we can't, John, we can't go to Odin's Yggdrasil and find him hanging upside down.
I mean, we can't go. Yeah, we can't go to Mount Olympus.
Beautifully said. And I think,
Yeah.
who said that is Peter Kraft, who is one of my favorite writers. And
yeah,
I think
you guys
John...
mentioned him.
We did?
Last week,
did we
yeah.
Really?
Last week, yeah.
Kraft is wild, and yeah, I mean, for me, like that's the crux here, is because why did I mention Luke with that? In the days of such and such, such and such and such and such.
That's right.
He's anchoring in a historical place and time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We mentioned that last.
And what I'd say about the Gospel of John is, I know the temptation with John's Gospel is because it begins with the words, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God." I know the temptation is to, particularly if you're not coming from a historical background, to tune out and say, okay, nice religious language, light and darkness, good, evil, yeah, whatever, but John, out of even more than Luke, has place names and geography.
Yes.
Like, John tells you where the baptism site is. Luke doesn't.
You know who said that was Alan Watts. He said, if you look at, some people say that John is the oldest, but if you look at the geography, it's the newest.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, yeah, it clearly, I think the geography in Ainon near Salem, because there was much water there, in Bethabara, where the baptism site is, it's obvious to me that the claim that John, the disciple of Jesus, the son of Zebedee, wrote this thing, the fact that John's disciple Polycarp, and Polycarp had a disciple named Irenaeus who basically spells it out for you, the fact that there's that close historical link is overwhelming compared to, for example, how do we know that Alexander the Great went where he went? Well, because General Ptolemy wrote about it. Well, do we have Ptolemy's text? No. Okay. Do we have Ptolemy's students' text? No. Ptolemy's students' text is from 1,000 years later on a different continent in a different language, right? Well, why do we assume that Alexander is reliable? Why do we accept the general gist of the text? Because the geography, the flora, the fauna mix. The gap between Jesus and this text is only 50 years. As I'm explaining that, I think that there are parts of the text that are even older, frankly. The gap between John and the first claim that John wrote this text is also only a generation and a half from John, which is ridiculously close.
Yeah.
And the gap between John writing this gospel in AD 90, 96, and your first copy of the Gospel of John, it's an Alexandrian codices, single page, dated to only within 20 years after the writing of this text. Maybe 50 if you want to push it, but generally it's probably within like 20 to 25 years. So I can't say that for the writings of Plato.
Right.
I can't say that for the life of Julius Caesar. That's pretty impressive.
Never mind Hermes Trismegistus or whatever, like, I mean.
Funny you said that, because I came across a Hermesian magician actually in Salem. He really dug me, man. We had a good conversation.
But, I was going to ask, like, did you go around in Salem? Like, that's a weird hot spot to go, man. I wouldn't go there.
I have a good time talking with New Agers, mostly because I know how to speak their language, and they'll talk about, there's black onyx for grounding. I'm like, do you know where that idea comes from? They're like, well, Google says it was an ancient Egyptian. Well, do you know where Google got it from? And they're like, no, I don't know where Google got it from. I'm like, well, let me tell you. Well, your earliest sources are, by the way, the Hebrew Bible.
Right.
Believe it or not.
They had no idea.
Which, yeah, it's so interesting that, like New Age, New Agey stuff. I mean, my mom's more spiritual. She's definitely done a lot of spiritual things in her life, but one of the things that she's been involved in is the Theosophical Society.
No way,
and I just
Abby.
find it so interesting. Yeah. Yep.
So is my family.
Okay, wow. Yeah. But
anyway,
they have a
whatever.
but no, it's really interesting that they don't see it as a religion, but it is. Like it is, like, all of these things, even if it's a belief, at least, it's not,
but it's
maybe it's not super organized, but it's so interesting. And like the whole, John and I have talked about this too, because he knows some, but the origin of Theosophy, debated if Blavatsky actually did what she did or not.
Krishnamurti, and then Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
But you were raised in that?
I think, for example,
no, I was raised. Well, my dad's a super atheist. Although he did take a class on the Bible when he lived in New York in the 70s.
Yeah.
I found this out like a few years ago, and I was very surprised.
So were you raised? What were you raised as? Almost.
Mostly Episcopalian.
Oh, really?
Like, basically, I did get baptized when I was 9.
John,
in the
unfortunately,
church.
was raised Satanist. So,
yeah. Those damn Catholics. What are you gonna do?
Oh, stop it! Oh, stop it! How dare you? Our Lady.
I will say, what was interesting to me, right, is like why am I doing a Bible study like this at the end of the day?
Awesome.
Like, I explained to you, like Abby and to you, Brad, is like I don't think there are many places that are really relaxed introductory levels to the Bible. That come at it from a historical point of view, a philosophical point of view, but without like beating you over the head with like, hey, here's an intense course that's only designed for PhD students.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, and that's like, even like the Bible, even if there's like a Bible study, like at the church that I'm kind of involved in, like, I don't know. I know that you have the academic credentials to tell me about these things. Like, I don't know if the person at my church really knows what they're talking about,
Yeah.
And I mean, the pastors definitely do, but if beyond that, like, who else? There's probably not really anybody else at an evangelical church who is like academically understands, what I mean?
Academically, like, because I know a lot of people that know a lot of stuff without taking like master's degrees and doctorates and stuff. Even though I have, I'm not saying I haven't. I know John has and other people.
Yeah, I mean, like, I haven't, but
but you're super smart. That's the thing. Is like you're at a PhD over that level at least. And so I wouldn't correlate academic success with holiness.
Yeah. I would also say too that, like, once again, I think our generation responds very well to saying that these events actually happened, and let me show you the reasons why. and give you strong reasons to believe that. It's called apologetics, not that we're apologizing, but like a defense of like, hey, let's just take this seriously.
Apologia.
Yeah.
Apologia means I'm not wrong. I'm going to tell you why I'm not wrong.
Right, but from a place that's evidentially based, not.
Well,
Socrates. For it's evidentially rooted.
Yeah, for sure.
The reason why people need that when it comes to the Bible, regrettably, and this is coming from a guy in seminary right now, right, is even in seminary, a lot of the basic stuff I'm saying here, for reasons that I should not utter, so I'm not beheaded by my oh so benevolent overlords. They aren't talked about. They are.
The reptilians are coming for John. That's
yes. You could tell Douglas Dietrich's that.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Yeah, but it's uncomfortable actually.
Yeah.
If this stuff really happened. And it's uncomfortable because the fear is, am I going to become a wooden fundamentalist? And am I going to just no. To say that love actually became a human being on the planet Earth 2,000 years ago,
right, is
actually the greatest love story ever told.
Absolutely.
And for me, at least philosophically, it explains why the beauty of the lives of people like Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King Jr., the Little Sisters of the Poor, who I meet in the city.
Yes.
Who,
thank you. Wow.
Social work.
I didn't know you know I wrote the amicus. I helped with Dwight Duncan, who I think I told you about. I wrote the amicus brief for the Supreme Court decision against the for the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Yeah.
Huh.
That was a long time ago. Do you remember that?
Yeah, no, I do remember that. I've been in touch with.
I still have the amicus brief right over here. I can show it.
Yeah, but what's interesting though is it's like for me it explains the power and magnetism of the idea that, unlike the gods of Norse mythology, who, like the gods of Greek mythology, who interfere in human affairs by molesting, burning, destroying, hacking, and unlike, for example, the unmoved mover of the philosophers, the god of Aristotle, right? Or the deist.
Yes, the unmoved mover. Yeah.
Right. Who's a bit of a watchmaker. He stands aside. What's amazing?
Almost a deist.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting is the story of Jesus, in a nutshell,
is not deist.
It's God intervening radically in the lives of human beings by loving them and entering into the
participation.
Into the dirtiness of their suffering.
The dirtiness. Exactly.
Suffering, right? This is my body given up for you.
I think Aquinas said that there is more space between a finite being and an infinite being than a finite being and a finite being. So if God is infinite and we're finite, it's a miracle that he would even want to become one of us.
And not only one of us, but if I chose to become a human being, right?
To be sacrificed.
Yeah. But here's the wild thing. Not only to be sacrificed in like okay, I'm going to choose a firing squad. Or hey, or better not, if I'm going to be born at all, let's not talk about death for a moment, right? Let's talk about being born, the messiness of being born. Okay?
Yeah, right.
If I'm going to choose to be born at all, and I'm God, I don't have to choose to be born. I could just appear if I want to, right?
Yeah.
If I choose to be born, I want to be born in a nice, clean hospital environment. I like my mother to be intensely wealthy. I would like to be in the night. The last place I want to be born is to a 13-year-old peasant virgin girl on the barges of the Roman Empire in a dirty, smelly place where you feed animals.
Farm place.
They're not even literate, for crying out loud.
That's pretty rock and roll.
I might disagree with literate. So
it's heavy metal, man.
So I mean, the fact of the matter is, why did God choose that at the end of the day? And once again, this is what's so subversive for me about Jesus, which I love about Jesus.
It's not in any other religion, by the way. I don't think
it's well for me. What's interesting is how do you overthrow the hierarchies and powers of darkness that exist?
By seeping to the level below.
You
like
become
the
the lowest of the low, which
like
was
the hobbits.
Yeah.
But actually, that's Tolkien's genius, right? Is what he's saying is what is small enough to be overlooked by all, but is actually
exactly Sauron mistakes the whole thing. Why they lose is one of the reasons is because Sauron overlooks them because he doesn't think hobbits will, accomplish that type of thing. He imagines it's Aragorn and Gandalf, and it was for sure, but
I mean, without the hobbits, Sauron would have taken over, and things wouldn't have been very good.
Right. Well, and the reason why in the text, right, is this whole narrative of those who are the littlest, those who are the meekest, they shall inherit the earth, right? Meaning that
the mild,
they are in pulse with what matters most: green growing things, love of neighbor, love of community, love of a good hot meal, love of a good stout pint, and basically loving each other in the process. Whereas those who covet power at the end of the day and control, they're going to ultimately fall prey to the gods which they serve. You become like the gods you worship at the end of the day. So what's so subversive about Jesus in that narrative, right? Of, okay, the word became flesh and dwells among us, and we beheld his glory. The glory is of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth, for the law came through Moses. To translate in human terms, that's the manger. That's an infant carried in his mother's arms who is a political refugee while his hometown is basically being ransacked by Roman centurions, murdering 2-year-old children and under.
Massacre of the innocent.
That is a 30-year-old man with a whip in his hands running through the temple saying, "Get these things away from here. My Father's house is not to be made a house of merchandise, but you have made it a den of thieves." What that looks like at the end of the day, right, is ultimately the expectations turned utterly on its head. And behind every great story is irony. We love twists. We love twists. And the biggest irony for me is the fact that the story of Jesus, every single person thinks that they got it, from the monk in the monastery who recites it daily, to the atheist who's never picked open a Bible, or the Christian, by the way, who's never picked open their Bible in their life. But if you read the text, just read it, and you just look at what is plausible about it. I'm not saying that you have to buy all of it hook, line, and sinker. No one does that on the first reading. I didn't do that at the first reading. What you find is a story that is so wildly and plausibly beautiful, no human being in their maddest nightmare of a dream would ever concoct the idea of that kind of incarnation of God. We've invented some wild things as human beings. I've been even looking into Japanese toilets, for crying out loud. But we've invented some very
what are the Japanese toilets? What's different about them?
They're amazing.
Oh, they are literally.
John is trying to talk about bidets. That's what he's trying to do.
But in a nutshell, what I'm trying to communicate here is, we would, of all the versions of God becoming a human being, we would never concoct it as Jesus of Nazareth. And the fact that
you never know. You could be sponsored by a Japanese toilet company on your channel as well.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy theory, guys. If you look at my algorithms and you play this Bible study backwards, and you say my words, it's like playing Beatles albums backwards. You're gonna find codes. Hopefully, there's no 666 numbers or something like that. But guys, I want to thank you. I really am eager to dive into the Gospel of John next week. We could start again with those first 14 verses, or actually pick it up from there. But I'm excited to go through this because, once again, it's a gospel that everybody thinks that they already have familiarity with, and I like kicking those sacred cows a little bit and saying, actually, this is inspired. It is inerrant. I think it is the Word of God. But all of you guys have been missing out on how radical and how new this actually is. So I'm excited, and I want to thank you for being my merry band of fellow explorers, because I don't know about you, Abby, I'm a little tired of small church groups that are kind of like, we've read our favorite verses and now let's move on, and we're all nodding pietistically because the oracle has spoken, and let us return Neo to the Matrix.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree, and thanks again, John. I mean, you know, and just for including me, and yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean.
It's been wonderful chatting with everybody.
Yeah, is there any people?
No, thanks to Matt, by the way. No, I'm just kidding.
Love you, bro.
Well, love
no,
you all.
Many thanks to Matt. I love him. He's
dude, right back at you.
I know he's been around with John for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I remember back in the day, he was like, my colleague Matt Lewis is going to get the audio file up or whatever. I'm like, dude, all right, great, because I can't do it. I'm not great.
When I'm not causing trouble, I'm putting things together, you know?
Dude, you're
what I'll say.
Thanks, God bless you, and honestly, like, thank you.
Speaking of putting things together, let's get Mel Gibson on the next National Treasure movie. How about it, huh?
National Treasure 4?
Yeah, let's get him on it.
Or would it be 3? Or would it be
or at
4?
least the Uncharted franchise, because, you know, we could do better.
You think
I mean, nothing's gonna happen until the strike gets over, so.
Well, I mean, you could have independent.
Hope that I don't know. I'm out of.
They call them scabs, and Mel Gibson doesn't give a crap about Hollywood movies. So he's gonna make that record. I mean, that movie. He'll make a record too.
Podcast
is going to come live from the writer's strike, where we're going to try to do a Bible study with people protesting.
Yeah, we're gonna be interviewing the people from Rings of Power and all that stuff. No.
If you guys are willing to fly to New York, we can make that happen. We have, and I know the Whole Foods where they're protesting. We can make.
Wow.
The city or the state? Matt lives in the city, I think, right?
I live in Brooklyn.
Oh, wait, Greenpoint?
Yes, sir.
Bedside? Oh, Greenpoint. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the best place. I know I know a few artist friends that live there and musician friends.
Yeah,
that live in Greenpoint,
awesome.
Brooklyn. It's nice because you get the light. The light that hits inside is like perfect for painting and whatever.
Yeah, it's great. You know, I get to run to that light with my Hollow app. You know, that's me.
That's a great neighborhood, dude. Yeah.
Hollow.
Good luck.
A Book and Spade company.
Yeah.
So many like cool.
Please sponsor this channel, Hollow. Please and thank you.
Honestly, if I reached out to them, I'm curious if they'd be like, "Oh yeah, right on."
Hollow and Hollow. Hollow is the one that has nothing, and it's just it's completely hollow. And but Hollow is great.
It's like dessert and desert, you know. One of them you want, one of them you don't.
Exactly.
And there's prey.
Right. Wow. We're really on
the
a roll
one
here.
who is prey, hunted down by animals or human beings.
See, this could be part of one of the riddles in the new National Treasure movie that they have to decipher, and it's all about
that'd be kind of cool.
Double meaning
it's like
words.
Who's the predator, who's the prey? But they had the recent movie which was called Prey. And it was like a sequel to The Predator, you know? On Hulu, and it looked like it was Aubrey Plaza who started it, but it wasn't.
But it's crazy to me that the sequel to the Aliens movies is really a prequel, and it's Prometheus.
Oh, the Prometheus?
Yeah, that's wild. It's crazy how bad of a movie got such a an incredible following. It has like one of the most incredible openings ever and extended scenes that never got released.
I actually love it. I love
never mind.
Scott.
Pardon me. That movie is actually very good.
Do you not like it? It's okay.
No, that movie is problematic. I say problematic. It's just it doesn't have a structure that is easy for a lot of people to follow. But when I watch a lot of YouTube essays on it, I instantly like, oh, this is a way better movie than what I experienced. You know, it's like, oh, if only I watched all of the YouTube videos, all of 20 hours I've seen of Prometheus before watching the 90-minute movie.
But you know, Matt, to your credit, I'd say the same thing is true about scripture at the end of the day, right? Is like, I find one of my big challenges is people approach the text kind of like you approach Prometheus the first time. It's like, oh yeah, it's nice, it's great, whatever. But when you have like the 20 hours of background behind it, and you know who is who and what is what, and why is there a cut scene, and why was the scene cut from this, and why is this here, and what is the language behind this, and what's the perspective behind this? Oh wait, this was written to an audience that it wasn't for a first 21st century American audience. I mean, it's not written in, even in an English translation, it doesn't really make sense without the idioms. Oh wow, then suddenly it becomes interesting and powerful and poignant. And I think that's the thing that for me, like, the church is supposed to do. Like, the church's job is to explain and to translate. It wasn't the whole point of the Protestant Reformation in the first place, but the Bible in the hands of, like, the whole point is to try and make communicative the message that the person actually believes is divine. And how can anyone accept it as divine in the first place unless it's in their own language? And I absolutely say the best analogy is the analogy between the artist and the work of art and the audience. The artist has a vision in their mind of the way they want it to go. They create a work of art. And then they want to share that work of art with the world. The problem is that work of art makes sense even if it's meant for a wide audience in a very specific cultural frame and time. I'm not saying that there aren't universal truths that won't ring down the centuries, like take J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. It's applicable, I'd say, to like almost every single generation that picks up the Lord of the Rings, hands down. But there are elements of that text which make a lot more sense if you read the Silmarillion, which make a lot more sense if you know that the author lived through like 2 world wars.
Yeah, definitely. No, that is true. Yeah. Like, or if you know, like if you take, when it was written, based on, I mean, it's like Narnia. Like, my mom and I have been reading the Narnia books, and I'd only read as a child, like, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I was surprised at how, like, actually, how kind of radical they were,
Yeah.
Well, guys, I want to turn to prayer mostly because I do need to make sure that Samantha gets fed for dinner at some point.
I need to have dinner too.
But I mean, for me, I'd be like, yo, next time I'll bring the pizza and we'll make the party last until 3 a.m. in the morning, and then we'll go through the entire saga.
See, this is why next year when I come visit, God willing, I have to spend like a week because your wedding's gonna be super busy, but we have to have time to like hang and do this kind of thing.
When is the wedding?
Wedding is March 16th.
It's my brother's birthday.
Oh God.
Isn't that crazy? And March 6th is my dad's birthday. But
oh wow. But yeah, don't say where it is because you have people watching and
no, we'll talk later.
I'm just curious, by the way, Matt. Do we have any questions in the live feed before I turn to final prayers?
Yeah.
We have a reference to my old username on Twitter from Aberforth in the All Hail Octocide classic, but no comments other than that. So
yeah, I said I was gonna post something. Thank you. I said that somebody was gonna post something in the chat, and I couldn't resist at the beginning. Element Octocide was
throwback.
A great time.
Throwback to all of us first meeting. Good times.
Yep.
Octocide is a molecule, by the way.
All right. I
just thought you guys get. I mean, oxygen, and nitride is an element, both, but oxide. Sorry about that. It's not an element. It's a compound.
Yeah, it was still really clever of Matt's handle. Just as clever
this is the entire point of the entire broadcast. Just kidding. I'm joking.
I can find an allegory too there.
Look at this. Can you guys see this?
I can find allegory. It's faith in the
B. It says BEE and it's signed by Bret Easton Ellis. John, do you know who wrote that book?
Bret Easton Ellis. No, not off the top of my head.
American Psycho.
Oh, yeah. I took an entire class in American Psycho. Actually.
You did?
Yes, I literally did. It was. I had
to
English credit, and had a professor who was into it way too much.
Really?
Yeah. But anyway, so in terms of prayer requests, before I begin on my end, does anyone have any intentions for it? Anyone in particular that they want to keep? I know on my end that there's a woman by the name of Schaffer who is undergoing breast cancer right now. Things are a little rough for her, so I ask that all of you keep her in prayer for healing, for comfort, for deliverance during this very, very, very tough time. God stretches his hands upon her to help her through this. I also ask you all to lift up the specific intentions of a very close loved one of mine by the name of Stephen. Just suffering in several different ways, just for healing, just resolve comfort for him in his life right now. I want to lift up in a very special way Samantha for being heroic, as we recently returned from Massachusetts and we visited the graves of her ancestors at Plymouth, which I jokingly called Plymouth because it was kind of funny. And the experience there of spiritually having those encounters, and just to lift up myself in your prayers right now for the work I do in seminary, for the work I do in my parish, for my own physical health, as well as just when you think everything is looking good, and you twist, you have turns, just that all continues well there.
Amen.
Yeah. Abby, any loved ones or any thoughts, intentions to throw out there?
A friend of mine who was in a program for the blind with me many years ago, her son, who she just adopted 2 months ago, suddenly passed away a couple of nights ago. He was I just lift him up in wherever he in heaven, and
absolutely
her being behind, and he
how old?
He was 3, I believe. Yeah. And she is the first blind foster mother in the state of Washington, by the way.
No.
Yep. And she luckily he spent most of his life with her, and he had a really loving person to be,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's tough. So
thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
They're definitely meant prayers for sure.
Yeah. Katie
it's
and
sad.
Thomas.
Life is sad,
Yeah.
Pray. Let's go. Next.
Amen. May God make his face to shine on them in peace. All right, Brandon, any intentions of your own as well?
I'd like to thank you, John, number one. I love you as a little brother, and I'm so proud of you. And I thank you for inviting me on. It's so I'm really tired.
Yeah.
I've had a busy day. I've been up since 5 a.m.
Yeah, get rest. Yeah, God bless you.
So, but when you said I had to be here, I was here. Because there's nothing, honestly, like I would sacrifice 2-3 hours to talk to you and Abby and Sam and Matt, because it means more to my soul. Now, I'll remember it tomorrow. I'll think about like what we talked about, and I think we should continue this discussion of as we go through the Gospels, as we go through the Old Testament, and I think it's great that you don't cater to the theological. You cater to the ordinary person who's just sort of trying to make sense of this. So I just thank you, Abby. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for John and Matt. 100%. I love you guys. And I shouldn't be up at this hour.
Yeah.
But,
Well, totally crash, man. Any really quick then last prayer request before I end on the Our Father, and we call it a night.
Let's go for the Our Father.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, man. Like I said, as we're praying this, if we could pray once again as if we were hearing this for the first time, encountering the radical rawness of these words, the fact that God is far more than merely a distant deity, but instead is intimately and parentally desiring to walk alongside us and with us in our pains, in our questions, in our doubts, in our anxieties, in our dreams. And we know that we are not alone, and that Jesus Christ has unveiled this by partaking of the very darkness which vexes us and conquering through it and over it. Therefore, as he taught us to pray, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed
be thy name.
Thy
kingdom come. Thy will be done
on earth
as it is in heaven.
Give us
this day
our daily bread, and forgive us our
trespasses,
as we
forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not
into temptation, but deliver us
from evil.
For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever.
Amen.
Amen. Glory be to the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Mother of sorrows, pray for us.
Yeah, so Matt, let us know when you're going to do the outro.
Right on, man.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Bye.
Ciao.